Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Bob's Live. Getting started a little bit late this week. It's been one of those days where I've just been felt like under the gun the whole day to get stuff done. Um, but it's great to be back and streaming this week. And well, if you live right here in the area, you might hear some rumbles of thunder because right now it's a little bit stormy out. And well, part of this episode is going to deal with that. But first, I thought we would head out to the greenhouse and take a look at this year's pansy crop. So last week we were down at the river range taking a look at mums. The other fall crop that we grow is pansies. And it is by far probably the biggest single plant type crop that we grow. Because we grow literally tens of millions of pansies every fall. So let's check that out. Today I'm out here in the greenhouse where we're growing our fall pansy crop. So all of these plugs that you see behind me are all fall pansies and violas that will be shipping out over the next few weeks. So we're growing literally millions of plugs of pansies. And pansies are the perfect plant to plant in the fall so you get 2 seasons of color. When you hear the word pansy, you might think of a weakling or somebody that's not very strong or hardy. Pansies are no pansies. They can survive practically subarctic temperatures. You can plant them in the fall. They'll survive the freezing cold of winter and then happily start blooming again in early March. So if you want some really early spring color, the perfect time to plant pansies is in September and October in the fall. In fact, pansies are a cool weather plant. So growing them this time of year, and I'm out here just sweating right now, is a real challenge. So we actually use things like shade cloth overhead to help keep the greenhouse cool to grow the pansies. And thanks to our cooler temperatures here in West Virginia, we can actually grow pansies a lot better than greenhouses in the south. So actually a huge market for our fall pansy plugs are companies in the south that buy the seedlings and then transplant them and grow them out to a finished product. So quite a few of these will actually get shipped all the way to Texas. And of course, a lot of these plugs will also be transplanted for our own finished product production. So in the fall, when you find bedding flats of pansies at our stores, they all started off just like this as seedling plugs that were then transplanted. And here in the coming weeks, we're going to start transplanting, and in the greenhouse just in front of me here, we'll start laying out finished flats of pansies, and over time that entire greenhouse will basically turn into a huge colorful quilt. So that was a quick look at our fall pansy crop, and of course I'm going to check back on it as we transplant and of course as they start to bloom. So for this and other great information, you can always stay up to date by checking us out at bobsmarket.com. Alright, so that is first look at our fall pansy crop. Of course, it's going to be a few weeks once we start transplanting before we start seeing blooms out in the greenhouse. But once we end up with that huge carpet of color, it's really amazing because pansies, believe it or not, actually have a pretty strong smell. Um, it's a very floral, kind of sweet smell. And in the fall, whenever we have the sides of the greenhouse open, on some days you can actually smell it from right here in the parking lot, which that's always kind of amazing. Of course, give us a follow on social media. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and I also need to update this because we're also over on TikTok. And you can find us there at Bob's Market. Up next, let's take a look at the weather because the weather has been nuts recently. And yeah, right now it's 82. It's saying that it's partly sunny right now. And yeah, as I said, looking over toward Pomeroy out my office window, it's kind of dark over that way. And I think I just heard a rumble of thunder a little bit ago. But right now, today, the high, and I can agree because I looked at my thermometer earlier and it was that exact temperature. The high today here in Mesa was 91. And yeah, we've got some temperatures up in the 80s, but that threat of rain is sticking around through Wednesday and Thursday. Right now, it looks like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are finally going to start to dry out for us. I know for me in the garden, and also with the thunderstorms right now, I forgot to mention we are under a flood watch. So keep an eye out for any high water. But again, getting back to the weather, here recently it seems like every single day we've had a rain shower. And you get out in the garden to get started on something, and then it rains. Or the weather is nice, and you think, I'm going to get home and work in the garden, and then it rains. And it seems like I just haven't been able to catch a break as far as gardening goes over the last couple weeks. And my garden is starting to suffer because of that. So this week for our main video, I want to kind of show you a side of my garden that you never really see on Bob's Live, and that is when my garden isn't looking its best. So I talk about it in the video, so let's just get into it. Hello. Today I am out here in my very weedy garden. You might have noticed the last couple weeks we've had a ton of rain, and well, the weeds are taking over the row portion of my garden. But today we've got a break in the weather, and I'm able to get out here and pick my green beans. But the weeds are so bad in this section that I've decided just to pull up the plants, pick the beans off of them because they're pretty much done producing for the season. Then that way I can come in here. I'm actually probably going to come in with a weed eater and cut everything down. And then I can till up this little area and plant fall turnips. So that's my plan, but notice I haven't shown you the green bean area yet. Yeah, it's pretty frightening. Let's take a look at it. Oh, it just hurts. I mean, I had this looking great just a couple weeks ago, and then it seemed like every single time we had a sunny day, I was either away from home or at work, or you know how it goes. Every time the weather's perfect, you don't have time to get in the garden. But yeah, believe it or not, there's actually beans in here, and there's actually quite a few. I might end up with more beans than what I had last year. So underneath of that pile of weeds, I do actually have some green beans. And yeah, the plants produce pretty good. Of course, we got some little critters crawling around there. That's always the fun part of picking beans, because you never know what you'll find. But yeah, the plants are pretty full. So I'm just going to work through this and end up with a pile of beans and bean plants. But oh my, it is a mess in here. Alright, it is the next evening, and I am out here to continue picking beans. Because guess what? I got one row done, and it started pouring down the rain. Who would have guessed? So yeah, that's just the nature of gardening. You know, the weather never cooperates. It's sunny when you can't be in the garden. It's rainy when you can. And yeah, sometimes the weeds get a little bit out of control. You know, a lot of times here on Bob's Live, I try to show my garden in its best light. So what you don't see is the 2 or 3 hours that I work on the garden before I turn the camera on. Because, you know, it's kind of like having a dirty room. You don't want to let people see that. You clean up the house, you know, before guests come over. And maybe I shouldn't do that, because it kind of gives unrealistic expectations of gardening. Just a few weeks ago, this section of my garden was a weedy mess. It looked really good before I went to cultivate. Of course, while I was at cultivate, just like this entire summer, it poured down the rain. And yeah, we had some weeds. And behind me there's some weeds starting to pop up. So right here in this bed, you might have originally remembered that I had a row of Brussels sprouts and a row of pak choi. Well, I harvested the pak choi, and some of it bolted, so I had to compost it. But then also bugs got into about half of my Brussels sprouts. So I dug up half of that row. I've got some endive that's coming in beside of it. It's kind of late in the summer for it. We'll see how it does. And then I've also got some late season radishes that are coming up. But yeah, also, I mean, you can see right there behind there, I need to weed eat along there. So yeah. And also my tomatoes, I did a whole episode a couple weeks ago tying up tomatoes, or I think I did. Sometimes it's kind of hard to remember what I did videos on. But yeah, these have grown up probably a foot past where I tied them last, so I need to get out the twine and tie these before these upper branches start producing tomatoes. Down next to the bottom though, I've got some really nice tomatoes, and I actually just spotted one. Hopefully it's not rotten. Oh yeah, look at this one. It's got a little split in the top, but hey, I can cut that out. But yeah, that's first good tomato of the year. And I see another one down there that's starting to change color. And, well, since I'm doing now, I guess, an episode on garden issues, Another issue that I'm fighting this year is raccoons. So if I bring the camera in right here, see how that has been opened and there's kernels missing there at the top. The raccoons have been getting into my corn. And I was mowing yesterday afternoon, and over here where I have the nice seating area, my little garden hiding spot over here in the meadow, the raccoons have been using it also to eat some corn. So they're pulling the ears off and dragging them over here. So yeah, I gotta clean this up. But other than that, my meadow is looking really good. I mean, I'm holding the camera up right now. This is about head height looking around. I've got some really beautiful blooms. That cosmos, that is, well, about 7 feet tall because I'm standing up. If I step down, yeah. Wow. So yeah, when it comes to the garden, I've had some messes, like the beans getting weedy late in the season this year. But I've also had some successes, like this area of the meadow garden that's just beautiful. I do wish I would have looked closer at the seed mix that I planted, because this has a lot of morning glory in it that's just kind of taken over, which I'm not complaining because the blooms are just beautiful on them in the mornings when they're open. But yeah, you kind of have to pick through the morning glories to find the other blooms, and every time I look at it, it's kind of like looking at a puzzle because I find something else. I just noticed a marigold that's blooming, like right in there somewhere. There's also some orange cosmos there that's really nice, and some sunflowers. But yeah, every time I look at it, I find something different that's blooming. But yeah, you know, every year gardening, you're going to have successes, failures, and what's important is that you take notes and try to learn from your mistakes and come up with a plan for next year. So I already know one of the plans that I'm going to have next year is right here where my corn is. I'm definitely going to be putting electric around it to help discourage the little critters from getting into it. Of course, my goal where the raised beds are is to have a picket fence around that. And of course, it's going to be topped with electric also. So I think that'll help deter any raccoons, since they like to use their little handy poos to grab a hold of stuff. And, you know, they get shocked a few times, they'll go find somewhere else to munch. Also, I was listening to a podcast this morning, a gardening podcast, and they recommended having a buffer zone between your garden and any fields, or like if you're growing field crops in the edge of the woods, to keep things out like rabbits. So, like along my area here between the garden, where I've got some pole beans right here that are planted, and this section of the meadow garden, I only have a couple mowers widths of space. So I'm probably going to widen this out to create a wider gap. And what that does is, if you're a rabbit, you know, you're constantly looking overhead for hawks, and we do have hawks in this area. And that just kind of deters them from going out into an open area. So this was kind of a mistake of my own making this year, trying to go more natural. So I need to kind of expand that area on both sides, because I also, you know, in an effort to save gas this year mowing, that was my primary reason for doing it. I also let an area grow up over there, which it's been beautiful this year to look out and see like the grass like waving in the backyard. Um, I don't know, it's aesthetically pleasing to me. But yeah, that's something that I'm going to have to adjust next year. Now, of course, I am gardening here where the garden originally was at the house when we bought it. And I do have the neighbor's field right in behind me. So there's not much I can do with that. Um, so, yeah, I'll just have to try to rely on electric fencing next year. But, well, that is kind of a quick garden update, and now I need to get back to picking some beans. So, yeah, that's a quick update of what's happening in my garden. And right now, what's happening is a lot of weeds. And, I mean, that happens. If you're if you're gardening and you're not retired and you might have health problems or something that limits your ability to get out into the garden, you're probably going to be fighting weeds and issues like this a little bit more than somebody that can dedicate more time to gardening. Um, we always kind of joke here at the office that, we're all the starving baker because we're here around plants all the time, but sometimes we don't have time to work on our own landscapes. Um, but yeah, this time of year, with this weather that we've been having, don't get discouraged if you've got more weeds than normal, or if your plants are looking a little worse for the wear. That's just the nature of the heat combined with the rain and just, summertime humidity and dog days of summer doing what they do. Um, well, that is what I have for this week. So, yeah, just don't get discouraged. And as always, keep growing.